Tender Bars, the brand new, both in theaters and Amazon Prime original film directed by George Clooney and based off the true story of the main character in the film, the memoir by J.R. Mooringer. The film stars Ty Sheridan, Daniel Ranieri, Ben Affleck, and Christopher Lloyd. It tells a story about a boy growing up in Long Island, seeks out father figures among the patrons at his uncle's bar. The film is an hour and 46, and it is rated R. Welcome back to a brand new movie review here in Mac Talks Movies. We're talking about The Tender Bar, highly anticipated film that's getting a little bit of some Ben Affleck award buzz. Let's talk about it right now. So if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, ring the bell, do movie reviews, TV show reviews, streaming platform reviews, movie rankings, and a box office breakdown show. So please subscribe, ring the bell if you're new to the channel. Also, comment down below. First of all, have you seen this film in theaters, or did you watch this, wait for it, in 2022 on Amazon Prime? And also, please like the video, guys. That's how you support this channel the best way. Also, do you believe Ben Affleck should be getting his award buzz? So let's talk about The Tender Bar. As I said, this film came out in theaters, very limited, on December 17th, but went to Amazon Prime on January 7th. So this, for me, will be a 2022 release, just because I saw this film, obviously, in 2022, and it came out on Prime in 2022. So let's talk about The Tender Bar. So I was actually kind of excited. George Clooney is a director that I think hasn't really had the right script yet to get him through movies. Last year, I think 2020, he directed The Midnight Sky. Was not the biggest fan. I gave it like an average review. But he's had shows like, movies like Suburbicon, Monuments Men, that have been very middle of the road. So I was hoping he would break out of it here. But I was hearing award buzz for Ben Affleck. Obviously, before I watched this, he had already been nominated for supporting for the Golden Globes. And as I'm talking to you today on a Wednesday, this morning at the SAG Awards, Ben Affleck was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. So it is in the realm of possibility he does get an Oscar nomination for this performance. But let's talk about The Tender Bar. So it is a true story off the memoir of JR. JR is played by two actors. Young JR is played by Daniel Ranieri, who is making his movie debut, his first ever film. Absolutely fantastic. Daniel Ranieri is who really is in the first half of the film as young JR. He is really fantastic. A lot of great charisma, but also just feel like a normal kid. He's not being too charismatic, too over the top. He's playing the JR role perfectly. Watch out for this kid in the next couple of years. This is a really good performance, and he's acting with a lot of great actors like Willie Rabe, Ben Affleck, Christopher Lloyd, Max Martini. So it's some really good work. In fact, that Clooney saw this kid, put him in this kind of a lead role. At least he was the lead character in the first half of the film. Then the college to adult JR is played by Ty Sheridan. Ty Sheridan also does a very good job. I don't think his half is as interesting as the half with Daniel Ranieri as young JR, but both actors do a really good job and transition into each other very well. They both are believable as the same character. But by far and away, the biggest standout of the film, not shockingly, is Ben Affleck. He plays Uncle Charlie. So young JR basically grows up in this area in Long Island. Again, this is not a spoiler. Grows up in this area of Long Island, and all of his family are just not that. They're all poor. They all live at Christopher Lloyd's house, who is their grandfather. They all live at his house, and this is where his father is just a radio host who left him and his mom behind, but he always wants to find the radio to listen to him. And this is where Uncle Charlie comes into fray. Now, Uncle Charlie, again, is not the main character. As you can tell, Ben Affleck's playing for supporting. JR is the main character, but it's Affleck who is the real heart and soul of the film, being the father figure in JR's life. Really close relationship, and by far every scene that Charlie is in, it's a must-watch film because Ben Affleck is absolutely fantastic in this film. And this is coming from someone like me who is not the biggest Ben Affleck guy whatsoever. I'm not the biggest fan of him. He's having a great year, though, when you talk about The Tender Bar, The Last Duel, Snyder Cut, the year before that, The Way Back. So he's on a really upwards trajectory as of late. I am not the biggest Ben Affleck fan, but this is definitely, in my opinion, one of his strongest performances. It's a performance that steals every scene that he is in. He's a lovable uncle they could see in real life. It's a really authentic performance that isn't over the top and interrupting the main story that is JR, but he's in there just enough. I wish he was in there a little bit more, but especially in the second half of the movie. But when Ben Affleck is on screen, especially his chemistry with Daniel Ranieri, who plays young JR, their dynamic is really fantastic in the first half of the film. So Uncle Charlie is one of my favorite, definitely the best part of the entire film, and Ben Affleck deserves all this award buzz for this performance. Christopher Lloyd's also good. He has one little bit in the movie with young JR that's really cute and really interesting. All the actors are doing a good job in here. Clooney does a solid job, an okay to solid job of direction. And again, the cast is really good. I also think the first half is also much stronger than the second half. The first act, I was kind of like, even though this is not a great movie, I'm definitely on board with the story. For the most part, it's not mind-blowing, but I was kind of like, I'm kind of pleasantly watching this film. It's an easy breeze, but the second half does go a bit downhill for me. The first half, though, is very good. Is very solid as well. I'll say solid, and that's because of the Uncle Charlie JR relationship that really takes you through the first, I would say, first 50 minutes of the film. But let's move into the negatives, guys, with the film's well. Performances are great. The story's a very easy watch, easy an hour 46 without really blinking. The movie's over. And Uncle Charlie is a complete standout. There are some clear issues with the film. Is that this memoir that JR wrote is just, this is not an interesting true story. This true story you've seen, this is not well, yes, it's an original memoir because it's on the true story of the real JR. This actual memoir, the story just does not feel original whatsoever. There's so many cliches, so many subplots that get added in, especially in the second half of the film. When Ty Sheridan plays JR into college, one of the biggest issues is the second half of the film really does go downhill for the film, where it just is very boring at times. This whole subplot where JR in college meets with a girl named Sydney, who's played by Brianna Middleton. Brianna Middleton's really good. In the first, I would say 5-10 minutes, they're on screen together. They have good chemistry, but that subplot is so repetitive. And it just feels so forced into the story. There's just so much boringness that happens, especially because once he goes to college, there's a lot less of Ben Affleck. And that's kind of the heart and soul of the movies, that they kind of just need to get JR back into the bar as much as possible. And the actual Tender bar itself, the Dickens bar where Ben Affleck works at, when you actually think about it, there's just not enough time spent in the bar. And I wanted a lot more emotion out of the JR and his true father, the voice played by Max Martini's character. There needed to be a lot more emotion coming out of me. It's a very emotional relationship that JR kind of wants him to be his father, but his father doesn't really want a son and is an awful person. And JR is trying to learn about that the whole film. But there's obviously there's gonna be a huge confrontation. And I just felt it to be very bland. And that's what a lot of the movie, even in the first half, feels like. This movie is not a breakthrough story that's going to break the walls down, and an inspiring true story. It's not great direction that's going to elevate the product. It really is this Ben Affleck's character, and really just the genuineness that you care about JR is kind of the only thing getting through this film, because the script isn't that great. The memoir itself is not that interesting. And the second half of the film does go really downhill from a story and just a quickness point of view. It's an hour 46. The first half really flies by. The second half just really drags because there's so much repetitive storylines going on. And maybe the memoir wasn't long enough, because it feels like this movie shouldn't have maybe been an hour 30, not even an hour 46. And there are some emotional beats towards the third act that just didn't bring any emotion out of me. So overall, The Tender Bar was an easy watch and an award-worthy performance for Ben Affleck as Uncle Charlie. But overall, I'm going to give this film a 2.5 out of 5, a 54% for The Tender Bar on Amazon Prime. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on some of my other movie reviews from 2022. That includes the 355. You can click that playlist right there. It will include Scream on Friday. So I'll see you guys very soon.